Bom dia. Bem-vindos. Welcome to campus. Welcome to this next event of Campus Expert Summit. We're really happy to host you all here. I'm talking in English because we have lots of visits this 2 weeks, and we're happy to host them here to talk about a lot of different content that can help you guys develop your business, have new ideas, learn from other markets, and that's what we're going to do today. So today we'll host Tamzin Taylor, our amazing Australian head of apps based in London, working with European startups. So we're going to have from her a taste of what Europe is doing right and what can we Brazilianize and help our business growth here too. I will let Tamzin introduce herself a little bit, but we're super happy to have her here, and we hope you enjoy the talks and come back in other events of the Campus Expert Summit. Thank you, guys. Tamzin is with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the very, very kind introduction, Faye. It is so... I kind of express how great it is to be here in Brazil. I was last in Brazil about 14 years ago, and I didn't come to Sao Paulo, so this is all new to me. And it's fantastic to see you all here. I think it's a great opportunity. Now, as Faye mentioned, I work in London. I look after apps, business development for Western Europe, for Google Play. It's a very long description. And in my job, basically, my role is to help Android developers succeed now and into the future. That means making money, growing a customer base, growing engagement. Now, a bit of a story. I live in London now. I've lived there for 2 years, but I'm originally from Australia. But I lived in London in 2001, and I was in my early 20s. And it was so much fun. But you know what? Back then, there was no smartphones. There was no Snapchat. You left your computer at work when you went home. There was no, app for food delivery. There was no app for laundry. You had to get the tube everywhere. You had a book with maps in it. Can you imagine? You really got to know the streets. But the bad thing about it was that you couldn't get a decent cup of coffee anywhere. Now, I'm Australian, all right? We love coffee. We're very, very particular. And that's why I'm so happy to be in Brazil, where it's the home of coffee, like Santos coffee. But back then in London, the best I could get was a cup of tea with grease on the top. It was disgusting. And the other bad thing about London back then was if you wanted to travel around Europe, it was really expensive. And the best way to do it was do a Kentucky tour. Has anyone here heard of a Kentucky tour? Okay, for those of you who haven't, it's basically a large bus full of 20-year-olds. It's messy. So if we fast forward to 2017, I can honestly say London has changed dramatically. We now have smartphones, we now have apps for everything. You have, Uber, you've got taxis, and you've got flat whites on every corner, which is fantastic. And I think what really gets me is that between 2001 and 2017, I've seen a dramatic shift in tech in London, and the change is unbelievable. I mean, today you can hear all kinds of accents walking around London. The diversity is fantastic. It has a really global mindset, and it's really changed. And I've seen a city that has the capability to change, and that's what I'll talk about today. So we know it's a great time to be in technology, but if cities want to succeed and create the next unicorn, then they need to really provide incentives for startups to invest and take the leap. They need to invest in education. They need to invest in a diverse workforce. And most importantly, they need to encourage startups to have a global mindset. In the next 25 minutes or so, depending on how carried away I get, I'll touch on why it's a great time to be in technology. I'll touch on some of my favourite cities and what they're doing and what their commonalities are for technology. And then I'll finish with what you can do as a Brazilian entrepreneur to go global and expand and succeed, because that's what we want, right? Okay, so bear with me for 5 minutes while I talk about how amazing it is to be in tech. Okay, so we know that shifts in life generally come from three main forces: business, society, and government. And the one that can drive it the most is business. Now, this guy here is a guy called Joseph Schumpeter, and he is a famous economics professor from Harvard in the 20th century. And he made this statement that capitalism is basically the force of creative destruction. Now, you've probably all heard about creative disruption, disruptive industries, but I really like this because the idea of destruction indicates something is completely wiped away and something new is going to grow and replace it. And it's really inspiring. And we know that technology in the last, say, 50 years has been the biggest disruptor or destructor of businesses. So the graph behind me shows that in the last 100 years, the average lifespan of a company has dropped 50 years. Back in the 60s was about 60 years. The forecast is that it'll be around 10 to 15 years. So why does this matter for you? So have a think about who your main incumbent competitors are. How old are they? Are they on their way out? Think about your business. How are you going to create a successful business if the average lifespan is about 10 to 15 years? How can you pivot your business in these conditions? Now, given this, we also know that technology is really driving value in the world economy. The world economy today is worth about $100 trillion GDP, and today technology accounts for about 4.5% of that. Back in 1992, it was about 2%, and it's forecast to grow to 8% in the next 10 to 15 years. Now, normal global economic growth is pegged at 2.6%. So this means even today, technology is driving and growing at double the rate of the global economy. And we know that it's going more global. So US foreign earnings from technology companies 10 years ago represented 17%. Today they're 46%. So this is a US stat, but it shows you how they're also going global and making more money from their international markets. And of course, because technology companies are driving trillions of dollars of economic value in the world, it's really important that we have a really good pipeline of startups to fund the future growth, because we know that cities and countries that invest in technology have greater employment opportunities, which is better for everyone. And you'd all know that every industry is disrupted by technology. Something you've probably heard before is the formula CS plus X. Has anyone heard of this before? Good, okay, something fresh. So what this means is computer science plus X. X can be your industry, your passion, your favorite blog. It could be anything you want, as long as you add some computer science to it, and you can scale it out. And this is where we see success. And this graph from CBI Insights is just one example of how technology is disrupting or integrating into the finance industry. It's broken down by different subcategory, so things like payments, lending, retail banking, and it gives you a snapshot of the market and its disruption. If you're interested in seeing how CBI are looking at your market for your vertical, go to their website. It's free to register. And now more so than ever, it's so much easier to work internationally. I love this picture because I know it's really ugly and my designers tried to take it out, but I put it back in because this is one of my favorite apps. I'll talk about it later. It's called Flight Radar 24. Does anyone know it? Does anyone here live under a flight path? So this is why I quite like it, because I can understand what planes are going over my head. And I love this picture because it shows the volume of movement of people internationally. But what it doesn't show, which would be much, much greater, is the flow of ideas, intellect, money, and business that's currently going on internationally. But unfortunately, even though we have got innovation flying around the world, it's not equal. The Economist have this great report called the Global Innovation Index. This is the data from the 2016 report. As you can see, it maps out countries in terms of their position and ranking globally on innovation. The y-axis shows their score, and the x-axis, I can't remember, but essentially, if it's blue, it's good. If it's red, it needs improvement. And the size of the bubble represents how many people live in that country. So where's Brazil? There it is. Okay, so the good news is you've got a really big economy, lots of people, but there's room for movement. And look, you're not at the very end, so don't think this is a bad thing. Now, what are Europeans doing well? So I dug into the data because I really wanted to see where is Brazil compared, or Sao Paulo, compared to these other cities in Europe. And what we can see is, I've just ranked the top kind of European cities there. Overall, it's not too bad. The lowest ranking, just so you have context, is 128. So you're kind of in the middle. But the thing that needs improvement is the efficiency rank. What is efficiency? Efficiency is the volume of output compared to the inputs. So inputs being universities, funding, things like that, and output being number of startups, etc. And the good news I want to call out here is that Brazil actually lifted in its ranking 1 point since last year. So this is good. We're progressing well. Now, that's all fine, but what are these Europeans doing well? So let me now take you on a quick tour of Europe, not the Kentucky tour type, and touch on some of my favourite cities, which are beautiful to visit, but also are doing really well and doing interesting things in technology. Before we do, though, let me just give the context of Europe. So when people think about the startup scene, they often think about Silicon Valley and Tel Aviv. But let me tell you, there are many other cities which are powering through and increasing in importance. Overall, Europe saw 3.5 times the growth in their startup output since 2011. And in the last 2 years, it's been valued at 2.3 billion across Europe, compared to 1.7 billion between 2011 and 2014. So the growth is massive. And this is all down to a couple of factors. Number one, the democratization of investment. Now, I know one of our resident startups here is working on that, so I'd encourage them to keep going. And also, fundamentally, there's been a palpable shift in cultural acceptance of risk-taking. If you think about how Americans, they're quite happy to take risks, Europeans in the past have been slightly less happy to take risks. So that's changing, which is great. But what's working for these companies, or these cities? So let's start with London, because I live there, and it's easy. London itself, as I mentioned, has changed dramatically in the last 14 years. Has anyone been to London? Hands up. Great. If you have been to London, you might probably know, because you're in the tech startup scene, that the majority of the businesses happen in Old Street and Shoreditch, where if you're not wearing black jeans, skinny black jeans and tattoos and a beard, you're probably not fitting in. But generally speaking, that's where the action happens. And there's around 6,000 startups in London. It is the 4th highest number of startups globally, and it's growing 32% faster than the overall British economy. So it really is powering through. Now, London is helped because it's got a high concentration of influential organisations around it, and companies, etc., such as banks, VCs. Obviously it's got things like Google and Facebook headquartered there as well. Some of my favourite London-based applications which have done really well as startups include Deliveroo, which I use on a very regular basis, Citymapper, which is, outstanding, just outstanding, Skyscanner, which recently sold to Ctrip for 1.7 billion, and one of my favourites, I do have favourites, sorry, is Memrise, which is a language learning application, which they started about 4 years ago, but they've just gone from growth to growth. Now, a couple of key ones to point out from London include TransferWise. Who here has used TransferWise? Okay, good. I think they've just opened up their ability to transfer money to and from Brazil. So if you're looking to move your money into a foreign bank account on a regular basis, like I do, I shift all my money back to Australia onto my very large mortgage each month, then TransferWise is great. It literally takes a day to move money instantly between countries, which previously would take about 6 weeks. And they actually went through the Google Campus program in 2012. They're worth over $1 billion. They've got Richard Branson on their board. He's a nice guy. And they've actually decided to give back to the community, and they have started their own startup incubator called Startup Surgery. Worth checking out. The other one which I want to mention is Arm Holdings. Arm Holdings, if you've never heard of them, that's fine, but it's highly likely that you have used them because Arm Holdings power 95% of the world's smartphones. And they were recently sold for a record-breaking $32 billion US. Biggest exit in the UK ever for a technology company. Okay, so you guys have been to London already. How many of you have been to Berlin? Just about the same. That's good. So you may have experienced this already, but London is a really, really, really expensive city. Rents are high, which means wages are high, which means it's very expensive to hire people, right? Does, though, mean that perhaps, UK startups are a bit more driven. But for those of you who are looking to move to a city where there's a lower cost of living, then Berlin is the place to be. Berlin has around 2,400 startups. It's the second highest proportion of immigrant founders at 43%, trailing only Silicon Valley, and the third highest proportion of visa acceptance rates at 77%. So they're very welcoming to people from other countries, and they're very proactive in terms of getting a diverse workforce. Areas they excel in include fintech, digital health, and food. In particular, I'd like to call out a couple of them here. HelloFresh, which raised $88 million in Series G funding recently. And of course, Rocket Internet, which recently sold Food Panda to Delivery Hero, although it also owns a portion of Delivery Hero, with a combined value of $3 billion, which enables them to deliver 20 million orders across 47 countries. That's what I call scale. Now, from the city of food to the city of love, it's kind of not surprising that Paris does really well in terms of dating and music apps. One thing I'll note here, France is very well known historically for its investment in engineering, technology, and innovation. This is not something new. France really does invest in education. It has tax benefits, subsidies, and loans for their startup community. And just back on the education piece, coming from a country where I had to pay for my education, I'm slightly jealous that in France, education is really, really subsidised. Yeah, there's a French person in the audience. How much did you pay for your education? Nothing. In fact, a lot of French people get paid to go to university. Yeah, right. So you can see here, it really is a foundation for a very educated, skilled workforce. 81% of the founders have a PhD or master's degree. Only 15% of founders only have an undergraduate degree. And France is investing in technology. They're about to open Station F this year, which will be the world's largest incubator. It's going to have hundreds of, startups, VCs, desks, you name it. Worth checking out. Now, a few apps which I'm going to call out here, which are really revolutionising France. The first one is BlaBlaCar, which has made Paris the centre of Europe for the sharing economy. The Fabulous, if you haven't tried it, download it. It's won the Google Play Design Award last year, and it's an app that helps you achieve your goals. It's totally tapped into behavioural learning. It's stunning to use, and if you have a goal, they can help you reach it. They went through Numa, which is Google's startup partner in Paris, and of course, Campus Launchpad. We're very proud. From a music standpoint, Paris punches above its weight with Deezer, who've made $217 million in funding this year alone, DJ IT, and of course, the dating apps. We've got Happen, adopt a guy, and once. Once basically sends you 10 matches at noon. You've got 24 hours to accept or reject, or your love is lost forever. French people are mean, right? Now, moving on to a city which is less about love and more about saunas is Stockholm. Stockholm is a beautiful city. It's on an archipelago. The buildings are gorgeous. The food's lovely. It's also expensive. Now, Stockholm is really powering through on the charts of top places for technology startups. There's around 900 of them, and they're number 2 globally for producing unicorns, most notably known for Spotify, recently valued at $8.6 billion. Just humongous. A lot of people like music. They do really well because they've invested in education. They've got great universities like KTH Royal Institute of Technology and the Stockholm School of Economics. Both of these universities put a real emphasis on entrepreneurship and work with the Stockholm School of Entrepreneurship. And I think also their education might be free. Why wasn't I born in Europe? Anyway. And they also have the 4th highest visa acceptance rate in the world at 69%. Again, very accepting of people from other countries. However, if you do want to get on in Stockholm, it does help to speak Swedish. Difficult language. Now, other apps I really love from Sweden include LifeSum, which is a health and fitness application. Truecaller, which I use today. It helps you identify people who are calling you and makes it quite simple. And of course, my favourite ever, which is Flight Radar 24. If you ever come to Australia and to Sydney, you'll understand what I'm talking about. You've got to turn your TV off while the plane goes over. Now, Stockholm is a great place to live in summer, but in winter it's quite cold, dark, rainy. One city which is quite close, much closer to Brazil and Sao Paulo in weather and climate and attitude is Barcelona. Barcelona, sunshine all year round, really investing in technology. They've got around 1,100 startups, and they're also very, very educated. 87% have an engineering degree, and they have the 5th highest proportion of founders over the age of 30. So if you're over 30, it's a nice place to go. You won't get many Kentucky tour people there. Now, as I said, they're investing in technology. They're about to open Pier 1, which is a new startup community hub, which will be the home of the Barcelona Tech City. And they recently, the biggest exit they had was Privalia, which was an online fashion store which sold to a French company for 560 million. A couple of apps from Barcelona which we really rate is Social Point, which was recently sold for 250 million. Wallapop, which is a fantastic marketplace application. And Omnidrome's Titans Brawl with over 6 million downloads. So this is all great. Like, that was a nice tour, but what ties all of these together? What are the commonalities of these cities that make them great places for tech startups? Number 1, you might have noticed these cities have been around for a while. They're not brand new, so ecosystem success does not happen overnight. Brad Feld noted that it takes 20 years for a vibrant startup entrepreneurial ecosystem to develop. So I'm not sure how old Sao Paulo's startup community is, but I guess the message here is don't expect things to happen overnight. It requires a lot of effort. And just back on that, actually, Singapore began investing in their tech scene back in the 1990s. And in the latest report from Genome, they're now number 1 place for talent globally. So they've kicked out the US. There you go. Number 2, great hubs have a depth of technical and academic skills and talent. So you would have seen from the cities I touched on, a lot of them are investing in education. A lot of them have great universities. A lot of them are giving away education for free. And as a result of this, in Europe, it's 30% cheaper to hire people compared to Silicon Valley. And on average, these people stay 2 to 3 times longer because there's less competition. Now, if you can't actually, if you can't find the people on the ground, maybe the education system's not completely there yet, then make it easy to bring people in. European startups benefit from diversity, and I mentioned all of those visa entry success rate statistics to you earlier. One thing I'm going to call out here, Memrise, which is the rocket ship icon, they have 43 people in their company, and they have 30 nationalities. 30 nationalities. I tell you what, the day Brexit was announced, it wasn't a happy day for them. They're a brilliant organisation. The second one is OneTap, which is a receipt scanning application. All of their developers are in Slovenia. Their business development is in London. Likewise, the company who does Best Fiends, whose name I've just completely forgotten, all of their development happens in Helsinki. Actually, you might know, but you can't. And so all their development happens in Helsinki, and again, their BDs in LA. So a lot of companies in Europe are leveraging the talent that exists in these smaller European cities to really, increase their output efficiently. And global connectedness. This is the number one message I'm hoping to get across to you today. It's critical. What this graph shows is the number of, or proportion of customers that come from outside the startup's continent. And you can see here, for America, it's only 13%. But for Europe, it's 21%. Brazil, 4%. Let's work on that. Now, that's fine. We've been through Europe. But how does Sao Paulo compare? So from the reports I saw, and you can correct me if this is wrong, you've got around 2,900 startups out of a 21 million city. Yeah? Okay, someone's nodding. Good. You're in the top 15 largest ecosystems in the world, which is great. And you have a 30% success rate on visas. So a bit of room to move there. And it's got quite a domestic focus. Only 9% of startups target the UK and the US when they first launch. The global average is 36%. But the great news is, you've got Campus Sao Paulo. Woo! There you go. And Faye's very happy now. So, what we see is there's huge potential for you guys, massive potential, and a couple of key wins I want to point out here is Dog Hero, which recently raised 3.1 million, Viva Real that raised 75 million, iFood, I heard it's very popular here, that raised 91 million, and I left the best till last. My favourite type of application is a taxi app, is 99 Taxis that raised $100 million. So there is huge potential, and I hope to see your name on this slide in the next year. But you might be thinking, that's all well and good, Tamzin. You've talked about London, Berlin, Stockholm. All of these cities have been around for years. They have had lots of investment for a very long time. It's really unfair that you're comparing Sao Paulo to these cities. Yes, you might be right. However, let me introduce you to one city which has completely revolutionised itself, and I think sets a really good benchmark for what you guys could do. Let me introduce Tallinn, the innovator. Who here has been to Tallinn? One person. Where is Tallinn? Tallinn is in Estonia. Estonia is a really, really tiny country. Tallinn itself has about 450,000 people. It's the least populous member state of the EU. A lot of people who are there are blonde, and they were, put it this way, they were under the control of the Russians until 1991, and they didn't have access to any Western media until then. They actually, just anecdotally, could only receive Finnish television across the water. So a lot of them speak Finnish as well. But the point is that since getting independence from Russia in 91, they completely revolutionised their economy and their government. They made everything digital. I mean, absolutely everything. I had the pleasure of meeting the CIO from Estonia 2 weeks ago in Australia. It's quite random. And his job is to ensure that all the systems that underpin the whole economy are working and efficient. Imagine being support for that. Estonia has free healthcare, free education, and it has the longest paid maternity leave in the OECD. So there's great diversity and great equality there. Because they had the chance to overhaul all of their systems in 1991 to 1994, they have been the first country in the world to hold online elections. Incredible. You can do a tax return in under 5 minutes. How long does it take in Brazil? 5 years. 98% of all banking transactions happen online in Estonia. And something that you might be interested in is that you can register a company in Estonia in a quicker time than it takes to drink a cup of coffee. And I'm talking about good coffee here, like Brazilian coffee. Other things I want to point out is that because they're so small, their very survival depends on them going global from day one. So 70% of all startups from Estonia have customers in the US or the UK on day one. And they, on average, have a product translated in 2.3 languages. Now, this is only second to Shanghai at 3 languages. And I'd like you to really ponder on that and think about, for your product, how many languages have you translated it into? Is it just Portuguese? Is it Portuguese and English? Is it Portuguese, English and French? And look, the great thing about it is because they kind of changed their whole government and were able to start fresh, they recognise the need to attract top talent because they know they're a really small country. And, okay, I'll touch on this in a second, but it's cold, right? It's not a really nice place to live. They're not going to attract lots of people based on their sunshine. So as a result, they have introduced something called an e-residency program, which means that if you are a startup from Europe, you can register a business in Estonia without even entering the country. And better yet, they have something else called a startup visa program for non-EU people like yourselves, which means that you can also start up a business and move to Estonia and set up a business there very, very easily. I see you writing this down. The other thing the government's done is introduce an Estonian fund, which is $64.5 million, specifically geared towards early-stage startup businesses like yourselves. And they're working with industry to get that out there. Now, one of the key outputs that they have produced is a company called, and now I've forgotten, Starship Technologies. It's written on the slide, isn't it? So Starship Technologies is one of the companies that has the biggest seed funding ever in Estonia, and perhaps globally, I'm not sure. But they raised 17.2 million on seed funding. And what they do is they have this thing called RoboVan. It's basically a robot delivery machine, as you can see here. And they've done a deal with Mercedes-Benz to get that out. That's very exciting. So as I mentioned, where would you rather live? Like, Estonia is great. They've got lots of tax breaks, free education, paid maternity cover. What more could you ask for? But, let's face it, Brazil is a much nicer place to live, right? Who here does not like sunshine? So what I guess the message to take out of this is that what you can take away from what Estonia is doing well is the mindset. Have a global mindset and think about what can you do with your product and your business to go global more quickly. One thing I will move on to, because I said I would give you some indications of what you can do as a business. And I'm sorry, I do work for Google. I'm going to plug Android. Let me introduce you to the Android platform because when it comes to going global, we're here to help you. And quite honestly, I want to see your businesses succeed on Android by going global and reaching a huge market. Android has 1.4 billion monthly active users. This is just massive. And this is only going to increase as more and more people get connected to smartphones. We know that technology is getting cheaper, it's becoming more accessible, and we know that the price of data is falling. And Google itself is working really hard, around the world to make technology more accessible. As this happens, the forecast is that by 2020, 80% of the world's population will be connected via a smartphone to the internet, and the majority of those people will be on Android. I know that in Brazil alone, Android has 86% market share, and we're making huge investments to open up more ways for these 86% of people to pay you through an app. And why is this important? Why is it so important to have global scale? Well, the Waterloo Startup Ecosystem Report noted that startups that have global customers from day one grow 2.1 times faster than those that don't. And I know I talked about Memrise before, but I just want to say it again. They have customers in 198 countries. 198 countries. They're all learning different languages. And I think the biggest one at the moment is like Russian to Korean. But the point is that out of those 198 countries, 130 are paying them. 130 countries are paying them. This is the opportunity you have, right? Click. Now, as I mentioned, we are always investing in the Android platform to make it easier for you to scale out. Our job is to help you design your app, build it, test it, most importantly, and distribute it to all of these people. We've got a whole bunch of tools that are free to use. You can come and harass me afterwards. I'll point them all out to you. But one of the key things I want to tell you about is how we make it easy for you to actually get people to pay. Now, in Brazil, like some other countries, not everyone has a credit card. We appreciate this. And so with Google, we have a platform that allows people to pay via other means. PayPal, gift vouchers, which, by the way, you can now do subscriptions on. We've also got direct carrier billing. Now, has anyone used direct carrier billing? What it is that when you go and try and buy some, let's say, some coins through your Clash of Clans or whatever the app you're using, you can actually now bill them to your telecommunications carrier. So it all goes through your phone bill. And this is opening up payment options for so many more people around the world. Oop. And the other thing I want to comment on here, because you guys are all in that early stage, is that we are really helping our startup community test their MVPs so that when you actually do launch in production, you've got something which you have full confidence in. A couple of things which we've done is an early access program. We have pre-launch reports for quality, and of course you can do testing via Firebase. Just a quick question on the early access. Who here has asked their friends and family to test their product? Sample size of 3. Or maybe your family is bigger than mine. So the challenge there is that, of course, your family is probably not representative of all of your customers. Maybe they have high-end devices. We recognise this, and we also had feedback from people like you who said, you tell us to test, it's all well and good, but we haven't got any customers to test on. So what we did was we opened up this section in the Play Store called Early Access, where we're giving you the ability to upload your application, and everyone in the world can download it and use it and give you feedback privately, so it doesn't impact your star rating. Now, that's a big pool of people to test with, right? And guess what? It's free. So I'd encourage you to check out Early Access if you do have an application you want to test. Right, so to wrap up, thank you for your patience. I hope you've enjoyed the tour of Europe. The future is really bright for Brazil, and I'm so excited to be here at this amazing campus, Sao Paulo. My key point for you is, what are you going to do to make Brazil a more globally connected city, and how are you going to access that fantastic, huge market of customers? Thank you. Any questions? Hang on, I'm not going to throw it because I'm really uncoordinated.
Hi, just one question about Brexit. How do you think it may change the scenario or something? Because I've been in Lisbon, and in Lisbon people go a lot to Dublin. There's a big connection between them, and people there, they were afraid of Brexit.
Okay, the question was, what will be the impact of Brexit on Europe? I think, in particular, to your point, between Lisbon and Dublin, there should be no change because Dublin is fine. Look, you know, we've seen positive sentiment so far. I don't think it's going to have any dramatic impact as yet. We'll wait and see what happens with the government and what they do in the next, after the election, shall we say, that just got announced.
How do you compare the startup ecosystem in Sydney and London?
Sydney. Okay, let me talk about Brisbane, because that's where I was 2 weeks ago. Brisbane government the Queensland government is investing a lot of money into the startup scene. There are two main innovation hubs, and the government is deeply committed to actually make it easier for people to move to Brisbane to run their startups. I think it's vibrant. I think it's very similar to Brazil, actually, because they're both very far away. And dare I say, the lifestyle makes people quite relaxed. So I think, you know, Brisbane entrepreneurs are very similar to Brazilians. I think there's also the definite similarity where they need to look globally. And it's tough. Even the difference being that, you know, Australians speak some version of English, it's still tough to go global.
I tried to found my startup in Italy last year, and I spent 1.5 years trying to get in the ecosystem there. But the thing is really close. Sharing knowledge and technology in Europe, I think, is a kind different from America. I have a friend that lives in Colombia, and it's really, really easier than Italy. Share knowledge. Is that true in other countries from Europe? Because I have experienced it just in Italy.
Yeah, I haven't been to Italy, and I haven't looked at the reports on it, but it wasn't mentioned in my list.
Yeah, I know this.
So look, I think that, you know, every tech scene has its community. I can see there's a really strong one in Sao Paulo. Brisbane has a very, very strong tech scene, and Sydney does as well. And I think it comes down to that whole cultural attitude of being open to risk and open to sharing and working with one another, which I think is improving in Europe, but perhaps more so in other cities than Italy. Just behind you there.
Hello, Taylor. I would like to ask you about the challenge that come with going global for day one. So it's much easier when you have only one culture, one language, and I'd like to understand from you what comes in terms of challenges and, you know, unexpected issues that we can look for.
It really depends. So the question was, what are, you know, around the idea of going global from day one, what are some of the challenges that you face or that we've heard about? Again, it really depends which country you're going to. So number one, the biggest challenge is language and localization. And with just one thing I'll comment on if I talk about Memrise is they're a language learning app and they know languages. And yet when they went to Japan, they found that they weren't getting the kind of traction they wanted. And when we worked with them and we had our Japanese colleagues look through the app, there were many, many improvements they could make. And I think that the key thing here is to test. If I'm just talking in application context, is test different variants as much as you can to see what sticks, and do your market research and understand what their cultural norms are. For example, pricing. In Asia, let's take Korea, pricing that's acceptable is pricing that ends in whole numbers, like 800 Korean, what is it? Won. Thanks, Won. Compared to, say, Australia, where it's, they prefer prices that end in .99. So pricing's one of them. Graphics, types of gameplay, that kind of thing are important. And of course, if you're working in a finance-related industry, then you've got regulation and laws to deal with. TransferWise is one example it has taken them a very long time to open up new markets. They actually have to have people on the ground to do that. So it's easier for some industries compared to others.
Yeah, that's my question is actually related to his question. Because, you know, Brazil, for Brazilians, is a low-hanging fruit. He said that everybody speaks the same language, the culture, it's the same culture, the same regulations. We kind of know what to expect. And also from a marketing standpoint, we know what works, we know what we have a better understanding of our users. And if we go global from day one, my concern, and I'd like for you maybe to help me understand what the resources are for that, is every country has its own kind of way of doing things, right? And if you're a small startup, you want to focus on building a good product for a specific niche, right? And my concern with going global first is kind of stretching yourself too thin, maybe. I guess is a good way to say that, where you're trying to you got to think about people from Malaysia and the way they do it in Malaysia, and then and then do it in the United States, and you kind of, I guess I can understand perhaps that it's good to jump in. Is it maybe because it's good to jump in the global field early so that you can create an MVP that serves everybody, so you can grow over the long term? Because, if we spend all of our time in Brazil, then maybe, I don't know, we would create a really good app for Brazilians, but then it wouldn't transfer and it would kind of be crystallized. Is that kind of what are the resources for a small startup to be able to jump to global and already start thinking about markets?
I'm so glad you asked that
in a
question.
Distributed way. Thank you.
So the question was, what are the resources available to startups to go global from day one? Okay, so obviously I work for Android, so I can only really talk about apps. But what I would suggest is, number one, on the Play Store, on the developer console, if you have an app, we have a translation service. So basically, you can, we've got a whole bunch of third-party translators. You upload your app and say, give me a quote. They will give you a quote. You choose the one you want. They translate your app for you. That's one service we provide.
What about testing? Do you guys do anything with testing or dealing with, how does this early access program work?
That's a really good question. So for testing, we have a bunch of things. The first thing we have is that when you upload your application, you have the option of running or creating alpha and beta testing groups. Now, your alpha group will be your company. Your beta group will be your customers. If you don't have customers and it's a new app, you can apply to enter the early access program. So it's all on. I can send you the links afterwards. The other thing you can do is once you start getting some traction with customers, let's say they start leaving you reviews on the App Store, you can ask them through reply to reviews, right? You can reply to them and say, thank you so much. Please join our VIP testing program. Be first to know. And you can actually then get them into your beta program so that you can test with them earlier. The other thing we have is something called pre-launch reports. Now, you Brazilians would understand this more so than any other country, is that on Android we have many types of devices, many types of operating system levels. So the pre-launch reports, what these are, is that we will test your application in the cloud against a whole bunch of devices and operating systems for free when you upload it to the alpha or beta channel. And that means that you get an early warning on what's gone wrong, on what devices, which might not even be in Brazil, so that you can work on those earlier. The other thing we have is once your app is in production and you're getting all these feedback from people, leaving hopefully positive reviews, we actually show you things like review analysis, which you can sort by country. So if you've got a whole bunch of people in, say, Slovenia, giving you 1-star reviews, you can analyze that and see what their problem is and then fix it, which is a great thing. The other thing we have around that as well is, as you know, when how many here have an Android app or an app? Okay. So when you go to the Play Store, people look at your store description and then they can choose to hit the install button. We give you a report in the console that shows you what proportion of people clicked on the install button from looking at your page. And we show you then how that actually, what is good, right? So let's say that you have 25% of people installing the app. We show you the benchmark, and you can break that down by country. So again, you can see, and I'll talk more about this at I/O. Can't give away my case study, but you can actually see that your install rate conversion might be really good in Brazil, but really bad in Slovenia, and then you can work out why that is.
Good, that's a good tool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's heaps. We want you to go global.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
Anyone else? Questions? Cool. That looks like it's it. Thank you very much for your time today. If you have any other questions, feel free to come and talk to me afterwards. Thank you.